Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Cardinal Control Room. I'm Dottie Kreps, president of the BSU Department of Media Alumni Society. Today's conversation is going to be focused on filmmaking in Indiana, and I'm excited to welcome our moderator and panelists. Our moderator today is Ben Strack. He is an assistant teaching professor of media at Ball State. He joined the faculty in 2017, but before that, he had a short career in broadcast news as a photojournalist. Then he shifted his career to long-form media, where he's worked on over 40 film projects as writer, director, cinematographer, or sound designer. Our panelists today are Rachel Hardy, Hannah Myers-Lindgren, and Eric Pascarelli. All three have been involved in filmmaking in the Hoosier State, from producing, directing, editing, or owning a production company. So thank you all for being with us today, and I'm going to hand things over to Ben to get our conversation started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dottie. This is a lot of fun for me, I have to say, because I am a new enough faculty that I know so few alumni, and so my alumni list is constantly growing, but it's great to be here with three amazing alumni who had left before I even got here. So it's wonderful to meet all three of you. I sort of want to give each of you a chance to further introduce yourself, tell us more about yourself. And I'm also going to start with the first question, which is going to be, what inspired you to really get started in the world of filmmaking? So Rachel, if you want to go first, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you into this.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Hardy. I am actually a 2014 grad of Ball State. I currently work as a full-time video editor for a content studio down in Atlanta called Bread and Butter Content Studio. And then on the side, I also do regular video editing for BuzzFeed and all of their different channels. And as far as what got me inspired to get into filmmaking, I actually got interested in it back in high school. My high school did like these huge semester projects, and each semester was based on a different theme. And so at the end of the semester, you'd have to do like a research project based on that theme, and then you have to have some sort of technology portion to it. And I just randomly one day decided to try to make a video for my technology piece, and really just like finding myself interviewing people and being able to piece together a story and a narrative was what really got me interested in filmmaking. And so from there, I just went forward with it and haven't looked back since.
Awesome. That's amazing. Hannah, how about you? Tell us a little more about yourself and what inspired you into this world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a 2013 graduate from Ball State, and I work full-time for Tilt 23, a production company in central Indiana. I also work part-time for the Heartland Film Festival, doing their social media. And then I do documentary work, both with Tilt 23 and on the side. And similar to Rachel, I got involved in video in high school. I actually wanted to do a photography class, but it was full because everybody wanted to do photography. So I had to do video. And our first project was over Thanksgiving, and they said to interview a family member. And I interviewed my grandfather, who is a three-war vet who was in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and he was a helicopter pilot. So I interviewed him, and when I played it back to my family when I was finished with it, just like the emotional reaction really made me realize how important it is to tell people's stories and to hear other people's stories. And that's really what got me into documentary work.
Cool. All right, Eric. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and what inspires you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just like the other two, I kind of got started in high school, and I really liked, I had a video class where like we had a project to shoot and edit something. And like when I first started editing something and like just piecing it together to make like one cohesive little video, I got like really addicted to the editing and being able to like make a story out of editing. And so then I went to Ball State and graduated in 2011. And I am obsessed with movies. So I kind of, when I'm not making a video or I guess a movie or whatever, I am at the movie theater watching them. So yeah, I just surround my life with movie related things.
Very cool. So what keeps all of you motivated to do this stuff? Where do you find motivation? How do you seek that out? Is that something that you have to wait to be inspired, or you dig at something to pursue? Is it self-reflection? Is it looking outward? I'm curious if any of you have motivation advice for folks on filmmaking. Rachel?
Well, I'll say for me, I think that a lot of ideas for stories or narratives just kind of come to me. So even just in everyday life, there may be something that I see that I'm like, oh, that would be really interesting to kind of be able to dig into that story a little bit more. And just because I love storytelling and I love video production and the whole process of it so much that a lot of times I'm really eager to do it, and I don't necessarily have to like find that motivation, especially if it's a story that I feel really deeply about. So I think for me, it's really just the passion behind it and loving what I do that just kind of drives me and keeps me motivated with wanting to do this and wanting to keep telling different types of stories.
Yeah. Hannah, anything similar for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly what Rachel said in regards to there's always inspiration. I also feel the same way about that feeling that you get when a story comes together. Like say you have 7 interviews and you're like, oh God, how is this all going to come together? And then as soon as it starts clicking in your brain, that feeling is just so satisfying for me. And I love that. And then also just playing it back, especially seeing the subjects of your film, seeing them see their story told and get that validation is really rewarding for me and keeps me wanting to, keep telling stories.
Yeah, very good. Eric, how about you?
Yeah.
Where do you find your motivation?
Yeah. So motivation for me kind of is, since I watch so many movies and all of that, I kind of, the idea for me is I think of the sort of movie that no one else is making, not necessarily that it's like cooler or better or anything. It's just that like some movies have certain plot points and things that I am like, I don't want to do any of that. I want to do something a little bit different or have different kinds of characters. So I basically try to make the kind of movie that I would want to see. So yeah. And I kind of just right now, for instance, I'm just kind of letting things over a period of several months, just like slowly come into my brain, and I jot down ideas and it just kind of slowly comes together sort of thing, and write stuff here and there. But yeah, it kind of has its own energy. It's like its own beast, and it makes me it forces me to do it sort of thing. I have no control of if I don't really want to do it, I kind of still feel like obligated, like, oh no, I need to do it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a subtext I feel like I'm hearing from all three of you, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but this is true from my experience too, that there's times in your life when you have a media job, and these films that we are creatively motivated towards, Hannah, I think you literally used the word side project, right? Like that where some of our creative outlets are not necessarily the ones that are paying our rent, as it were. So I'm curious, maybe from all three of you, do you find that you have to seek out that balance? Do you have to balance the work that pays well versus the work that gives you a lot of creative freedom and interest and stuff like that? Eric, why don't you go first this time around? Is that something that's true for you?
Yeah. So I've been doing full-time video, like for my own production company, Pascarelli Productions. So I've been doing full-time corporate stuff, like freelance corporate stuff for 10 years now. And it's like, with my free time, am I really wanting to do, a movie, and especially knowing that like that's not necessarily going to pay or anything. So it is tricky. There's a lot of people out there who are into photography and they do that for a full-time job, and then they're still out taking nature photos and things like that. But yeah, I really feel like it's difficult when you do video as your full-time job to then turn that off and be like, oh, now I'm going to do video for my little like passion project. Like I felt like when I was at Ball State, I was like very hungry to make like creative projects and things of that nature. And now it's like, oh, it's my full-time job now. Do I want to, stop working on, this paying corporate job and now take a few months off and do my own other video job that doesn't pay at all. And so that's where I think it's an interesting balance, and it's very difficult to figure out what to spend time on, because it's like one you might enjoy. Yeah, it's a hard thing to balance.
Yeah. Hannah, how about you? Anything similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, time is definitely a limited resource, right? It definitely was different once you get out into the real world and are having to make money and having to do more corporate things. I've been pretty lucky both between the production company I had and then the production company I work for now. We do a lot of like stuff for nonprofits or communities or causes. So, a lot of the times it's still, rewarding in its own way. But then, doing actual short films on the side are different, although sometimes it coincides. Like my short 50 Little Birds was produced under Tilt 23, so I produced it with my coworkers. So sometimes the stars align, and a project can be part of the thing that you're also doing for work, but there's definitely a balance.
Yeah. Rachel, how about you?
Yeah, so I would kind of echo the same thing. I think that being a creative is definitely an interesting kind of life to navigate. And for me, I feel like having my side projects, or having like the things that I'm really passionate about and doing those on the side, is what keeps me going. So there are times like I actually really enjoy my full-time job and I enjoy the work that I do there, but it is a content studio. And so a lot of it can be like branding or like commercial work, which is fun because it allows me to kind of use other like skills or editing styles when it comes to doing that type of work. So it's not like I'm doing the exact same style of video all the time between full-time and my side things. But I also feel like for me, the side thing is just what keeps me going. So it's like I do this over here to work, but then I also have to have this thing that I'm really passionate about and this story that I want to tell, and do that. And that's funny that you brought that up, because this is actually like a situation that I'm in right now. I'm starting to try to get production together soon to start on like a new documentary that I want to do. And I've been trying to get through like pre-production for probably like a year now, but it's because I work full time and there are other things that are happening. And so things take longer with trying to get this together and get to actual physical production. And then there were times where I was like, I'm just so tired from working full time that maybe I should just sit on this for a while and pick it back up later. But then it's also one of those things where like I believe so much in the story that it'll keep like pestering me until I do it. So for me, it's like something that I have to have on the side, but also it is that really weird thing of trying to find like that perfect balance, if it exists, between the two.
Right. I used to say back when I worked in news that I worked in news to feed my stomach, and on all my weekends I worked on short films to feed my soul, because it was the thing that kept me going. And frankly, it probably made my news work better at the end of the day, right? So I'm curious, for any of you, what are your favorite projects that you've ever done, that you've been a part of? Hannah, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure, yeah. In 2020, I released a short film called 50 Little Birds that I mentioned before, that I produced under Tilt 23 Studios, the production company I work for. And it's just a 9-minute little film, but it was a film that I had the idea for many years. And then I'd moved to Alabama for a little bit, and it wasn't really feasible to do it because the subject lives in Noblesville. And then when I moved back, and then I found myself working for Tilt 23, I was like, hey, I have this project that's been like kind of, an earworm for, 4 years now. And we were finally able to produce it. And it was one of those where like it came together and it happened when it was supposed to happen because the right team was on it. And it came out better than I could have ever imagined it, just between the cinematography and then how the story ended up. And it definitely pushed my boundaries to my comfort zone, because I'm typically tend to be a pretty linear editor. And this is much more of a winding sort of poetic story that kind of doesn't hit the nail on the head with exactly what we're talking about, but kind of talks around it. So many people have told me how much it impacted them, because it talks a lot about processing childhood trauma and becoming, who we want to become and doing the things we're passionate about. And that's what life is about, all packed into 9 minutes. So it's definitely the thing that I'm the most proud of ever having created.
Very good. Eric, how about you?
Well, I guess by default, it would just be my movie I did last year. Because I mean, everything else has been corporate videos, and I like all of those projects. But in terms of, I guess, the most interesting one was I directed and wrote and did everything else with, except the audio work for the most part. I did a feature film over the summer last year called Chasing Rabbits. And that experience was just very interesting. And it's now, over with. We had the premiere last year. So like all of that was very gratifying and just an amazing experience to like see it all turn out and see people like watch it or be interested in watching it. And going through like the festival circuit and whatnot, which is what it's going through now. That was just a huge project that I did so much on, and it was definitely the most gratifying or interesting thing I've done.
Nice. Very good. And Rachel, how about you?
I would say, like everybody else, my short documentary that I did that went through the festival circuit in 2020, I believe. It was called Black Unscripted. And for me, that was the one thing that I'm most proud of, because for one, it is like the first short documentary that I did of my own on that type of scale. And it was something that I definitely walked into not knowing what to expect or really where it was going. So just to see that all come together, and I did it pretty much solo. I didn't have like a legitimate like production crew, or of course any funding or anything like that. So I definitely learned a lot about myself with going through that process. And so I think that would be the thing that I'm most proud of. And then seeing it go through festivals and get accepted and get an award and all of that. And then also just kind of echoing something Hannah said earlier about being able to see the people that are in your documentary and watch them getting to see their story being told, and the satisfaction and the joy that they get out of that. That really hit it home for me. And so I think that would probably be my favorite thing, or the best project that I think I've been a part of and done.
Yeah,
Rachel, I think both of our films were in indie shorts at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Ball State taking over a little bit. So who has upcoming projects? Rachel, you said you sort of have a pre-production, something in the works?
Yes, so I am working on, it's going to be another short documentary. And this time it's going to be dealing with education and kind of like looking at equity in education. And so that is kind of where I'm at now. I'm in, like I said, pre-production. So I'm still trying to nail down all of the people that I want to be a part of it and kind of taking like those initial meetings to kind of explain to them about it and all of that. So
very good. Hannah, do you have anything in the works?
Right now, I'm kind of in the in-between because I did a film for Indiana Humanities as part of their Waterways film grants called The Netmakers. And so it's currently going around on their Waterways tour, and I've applied to a lot of festivals. So I'm just kind of like, that's my main like side thing I'm monitoring right now. And I do have a dream project that I want to work on, but it's another one of those where I would just want to wait until it's the right time to do it, and that I have the resources to do it, and I'm not there yet.
Yeah. Eric, how about you? Anything in the works?
I've just been like writing.
And you're coming off the tail of a feature. You're coming off the tail end of a feature anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like that takes up it took a lot out of me. And that's still doing like the festival thing. And that'll end, in a few months. So I'm trying to get into that and also like putting it out for rental or streaming and stuff like that. So I'm putting a lot of energy into that still, but, I've been slowly writing a new project, another feature, that, maybe it'll happen next year. Maybe it will never happen. I will see what happens, but I need a little time off from it.
Fair enough. Yeah. So the next couple questions I'm going to take notes on, since I am not an Indiana native, nor have I made films yet here really in Indiana. So talk about your filming experiences of making films here in Indiana. Open question. Who's got stories to tell or advice to give?
I guess first. I don't know. I get asked this a lot because I have done several projects for Indiana Humanities, and they're really great supporters of film, especially with these last few rounds of funding that they've had for short films. But I just love making stories here. I don't necessarily know that I have any comments on. I feel like it's just easy, and like there are no restrictions. I know that we have. When you're talking about bigger projects and tax incentives, that's like a different thing. But in terms of telling small stories, telling stories of just people who live here, I love it. I feel like we have a lot more rich diversity in this state than people tend to give us credit for, especially in like the mainstream media. So I like being able to kind of like bust that myth of like Midwesterners are all the same, and really showcase different stories from throughout the state.
Yeah. Who else has advice for me or other alumni?
I shot my feature all throughout Bloomington. So this is all summer of last year, and that was Bloomington, Greenfield, Fishers, downtown Indianapolis, and Carmel. I think that's it. And so like each location has something interesting. So like in Greenfield, it was kind of like a farmhouse in like kind of in the middle of nowhere area, which was good. And in Bloomington, there was a very nice like wedding venue that we used that was like a farm. So like we were able to use the corn was the highest length or whatever. So it was nice and tall and it looked really good. And we did quite a few shots outside with like the sun down in the corn area, and like it looked really cool. So like that was all great. It was interesting in terms of like getting permission, like people got pretty excited usually at the idea of, oh, film and Indiana. So like that was exciting for people. But yeah, it's definitely not usual for them here. I assume like, in LA constantly they know the drill with all of that stuff. But here you're kind of like showing them a whole new world and they get kind of fascinated by it. So yeah, like location scouting that was probably actually the hardest part maybe for me, was doing that, because there's just, you look in a directory of locations that have signed up with like the film location directory in Indiana. And beyond that, I don't really like bothering people. So I didn't want to knock on any doors or like call random people and be like, hey, your property would be perfect for my movie. Can we film there? Because I feel like they get weirded out and everything. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting, but the payoff was really good for locations around here.
Yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. Rachel, how about you? Any advice?
Yeah, so I don't know that I have advice, but just to speak towards kind of the process of filming in Indiana and then comparing it to where I am now, because now I'm living in Atlanta. And I haven't gotten to actual physical production on my upcoming project here yet. But just being in pre-production, I can see a difference. Because in Indiana, when I was filming my short there, it seemed like people were a lot more willing to kind of let me use different spaces as far as like filming locations. Because like Eric said, generally people are like really excited and they'll be like, oh my God, like film. And so everybody was really happy and willing to allow me to use different locations, which was really helpful for me in the instance of not having really any budget to create this short. But here in Atlanta, where there's so much happening and like TV shows and movies, filming all the time, everybody has their rules already in place for filming, and things cost a lot more trying to secure locations. And I didn't even think about that. I thought that it was going to be kind of a simple ask like I did in Indiana. And everybody's like, we're so used to things filming here that we already have our rules and protocols and our fees in place, and you have to abide by that. And then I will say the other thing is, in Indiana at the time, I think a lot of my friends that I worked with in video had at that point kind of moved away. And so I felt like I didn't have like a real core production team to help me there at the time. I had friends who stepped in from time to time throughout the process, but not like an actual core production team. And on the flip side, here in Atlanta, there's so many videographers and different creatives that I have a lot of people to choose from. But then the downside is because there's so much happening here, a lot of people are always booked and they're always working like weekends and weekdays. And so it's hard to kind of find people and try to get them to be a part of something that is a lot lower budget than something they could go out and do and get paid a lot more for and stay busy with their freelance stuff. So I would say that's kind of like the difference that I've seen. But luckily, I did have people who came alongside me in Indiana and kind of helped. Like this guy that I know named Derek, who owns a production studio heading towards downtown in Indianapolis. And he allowed me to use actually his studio for like all of my interviews at no cost, which was nice. And so there were a lot of people that like rallied around me, just kind of like that Hoosier kind of hospitality that came with supporting somebody else in Indiana trying to do a film. And so that is one thing that I definitely feel like I'm going to miss this time around, just kind of having that hometown feel and that hospitality and rallying around. So,
yeah. I assume, of course, that you're talking about Derek Hammer, who...
No, actually,
no?
He owns like a production studio called The Box Indie. and it's
Oh
over.
yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them too. Yeah. They're really.
I did like some freelance work with him right out of college. And so he was a really good resource when it came time for me to create my short. So
yeah. So speaking of things like the Box studio there in Indy, or like Hammer Lighting and Grip down towards Indy, all of these sorts of things, what kind of resources for physical spaces, for equipment, or just for like people and brainstorming and groups, what kind of resources do you all know of that exist sort of around here in Indiana to try to help filmmakers? Is there anything that comes to mind?
So like I know on Facebook there's a group, the Indiana Filmmakers Network, which I've tried to be somewhat active in. And that's where I did like all the casting for my movie for the most part. Like a lot of actors kind of scope that out and stuff like that. And that's always a great place to say, hey, I'm making a feature or I'm making a whatever. I need some crew and all of that stuff. And that's a very helpful internet kind of location. In terms of physical locations, I know what you mentioned, like Hammer, like Grip and Lighting. I think they also have a side business that does like higher end video rentals, maybe?
Yeah. Derek has a few operations running now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like you can rent some really high end, Arri cameras and stuff like that. But yeah, since I'm a video production company myself, I was like, I'm just going to buy everything, or since I'm just going to use it on my corporate videos anyways. So I didn't rent anything, but yeah.
Have any of you been tracking some of the legislation movements happening in Indiana with film incentives coming into the state? Anyone see what's changing, and is that exciting to anyone?
I think so I do social media coordination for Heartland Film and have been involved with them for about 12 years now. And we definitely got really excited just because we're hoping that it can bring bigger, outside production companies and make it worth their while to come here. I know that it still needs to get signed or completely passed or something like that. So we're all just like kind of still holding our breath before we throw the confetti, but but I think it will be beneficial all around, because I do think that we have great resources here and we have great people here and we have great locations here. So we could be a great place for larger production companies to film.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I'm curious kind of like because I know it's not quite known yet, but I'll be curious to hear like the budgets and stuff like that, because like I'm, not to be a negative Nancy on it, but like I was very excited for years, and then I heard like what it was like in other states, and I know like you had minimum budgets of sometimes $30,000, $50,000 before you can get a tax incentive, and like for me it's like, well, my movie, like they're all self-funded and they're not going to be, they'll maybe be half that. And it's like, so that won't necessarily help me. And if anything, it might draw people to work on the bigger projects and decide not to work with me because I'm working on like a lower project. And there's going to be a lot more bigger projects potentially around the area if the tax incentives things pass. So that's kind of like the other, or at least my perspective of it. However, it will benefit a lot of people in general, I assume. So I think it would be cool for a lot of the crew people and a lot of the actors to get a lot more opportunities if that does happen.
Yeah, I could see it also helping Indiana's economy to be able to support more freelancers on the whole, which may also mean there are more folks who, in between their higher paying gigs, maybe they can come and freelance on your film too, right? Like hopefully it all sort of trickles down. Rachel, I know you're out of state now, but have you watched any of that? And does it make you hopeful for anything back in Indiana?
I've heard a little bit about it, but not enough being down here to kind of really keep up with it. But just from the basis that I've heard, I would really agree with kind of what they've already said with it being exciting in the sense that like it could bring more opportunities for different crew members or cast. And so I'll just be really interested to see, what happens and where it goes.
I think one of the crimes is that Bob Green's books are not filmed in Indiana, like stuff like that, where if it's actually set in Indiana, it should be filmed here. And so hopefully more opportunities come like that.
Oh yeah. There's a whole list of films, right, that famously take place in Indiana towns that they're all shot in the hills outside of LA or whatever. Always a fascinating thing. We should do a whole subcultural series on films claiming to be in Indiana. A whole festival out of it. So I'm curious, maybe the incentives aside, maybe, but taking that into account, maybe taking into account organizations and interconnectivity and studios popping up in around the state and that sort of a thing. What do any of you think are some key factors to really helping foster and create, maybe not create, maybe that's the wrong word, but to further grow the sort of film industry culture in the state of Indiana? Any ideas? What are the factors that could help that? Are some of them in motion? Are some of them yet to be thought of or to start traction on?
I do think the foundation is there. I don't know if it's just because I've been working in it here for 9 years, but I know a lot of people who have stayed. I know a lot of people who are doing incredible work. I found my DP for my last project through just somebody that I've rented equipment from, and then she ended up being amazing. So I think there is kind of like a little quiet network of people that would make a good foundation for it to continue to grow. I would like to see more graduates stay here and at least give it a chance rather than immediately going out to the coast. I think it's a great place that you can even just stay for the first 5 years and get a huge amount of hands-on work and really creative control in projects with the great production companies that are here.
Yeah, it's maybe with the tax incentive, if it does bring in production companies that are already somewhat established or anything, then I know when I was graduating Ball State, I was looking for production companies to make movies and all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, well, there's kind of one in the Cincinnati area, I think, or at least when I was, in college. And it was, all I was thinking was, okay, where can I move to get close to one of them? But if some bigger ones with any kind of name recognition or anything like that came here, I think that would make a lot more graduates hungry to be like, oh, that's our goal, is to work on a project with that local company. Because right now, it's hard probably because no one is, it's you need something with some sort of recognition probably for graduates to want to clamor to work with who has made some sort of movie or something. And maybe the tax incentives will kind of help with that.
Yeah, I could see that.
I will say, I agree that I think there is a foundation there. But I would also agree with it kind of being a quiet network. And so experiencing being here, just coming here, it's you just can kind of randomly just fall into the world of video because there's so much happening and there's so many creatives and just so many different networks and groups and everything. And I feel for me, at least, it felt Indiana was missing that connection piece, where it would be easier to kind of find that network and find good people in that network to kind of be with. And so I will say, I don't know if you all are familiar with Who Docs that launched recently in Indiana, but Black Unscripted is streaming on their platform right now. And so I think things like that also really help, because that is a way of kind of centralizing like different Indiana stories and being able to go to this one central location and find different documentaries and different shorts and different videos made by Indiana filmmakers or featuring Indiana stories, which also then kind of builds kind of a little bit of that network that I feel like is missing, or kind of bringing people together in a sense, that all do film, so that people aren't kind of isolated in these different little areas or little bubbles. And then I also think Heartland does a great job with supporting Hoosier films and kind of connecting people as well. So I do think that there is a foundation there. For me, it just seems like there's some sort of missing piece a little bit with kind of bringing it all together.
And
Yeah. Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to
Yeah,
piggyback off of like the Who Docs. Yeah, I know about that, and I think that is that mainly Hoosier documentaries, I think. And I know like Hoosier Films is also, that was a film festival, but also they have like an app which is just strictly movies made in Indiana. And like, I think that's helpful. And I think, yeah, Heartland is great because it's like a massive festival here, but they also have like an Indiana category, whereas like a lot of film festivals, even in Indiana, they don't even have like an Indiana category. So they'll take 2,000 festival submissions from like all over the world, and they'll pick like their favorites of those, and they will completely ignore like the actual local Indiana stuff. And it's kind of mind-boggling to me. But yeah, Heartland, I like because they actually have something like that. And I think that gives at least people some sort of goal or something in the area where it's like, okay, I have a shot at being in a Heartland Film Festival or something like that. Whereas there's, you have to look for motivation. And I feel like that's very helpful.
I know for me, I grew up going to Heartland. Since I was like 14, my mom would take me, and we would specifically go see the shorts collections because we loved being able to like rip the little papers and vote on our favorites. And then to see my film at Heartland in the Indiana Spotlight category 2 years ago, I mean, that was all I could dream of when I was a kid. So I definitely think they do a great job. They also do things like they partnered with the Indiana Historical Society last week to do Hoosier Spotlight Nights, which played the new Kurt Vonnegut documentary and then the documentary about Crispus Attucks High School. So yeah, they do a great job. And then Can is a great new local resource that is doing a lot of stuff, showing a lot of small Indiana-based films. They're also doing, I'm participating in June in a youth filmmakers workshop day there, which is high school students. And I love that. I love getting just kids in as soon as we can. I mean, all of us started in high school. So I think that there's definitely like in the last couple of years, it's really starting to get stronger in Indy.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say my movie premiered at the Can back in November. And it's like, really, yeah, that. And I think, yeah, like they seem to be very interested in trying to have premieres and show some local films. And that's a pretty new place. So like, that's a new added incentive for people, I think, locally, which is really cool.
Yeah, they're big on connecting to their local community, I've seen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, what were you going to say?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I think things like that, like Kudox and Heartland and all of that, resources like that are really good, and I think are really helpful because those give a voice to Indiana filmmakers. Because I know a lot of times, like I've even heard people be like, "Oh, you guys make film in Indiana? Like, what do you mean you make film there?" And so it's kind of weird that people think that like there's no stories in Indiana, or like people aren't working in film or doing like documentaries or anything in Indiana. And so I think having things like that, or resources like that promote Hoosier voices and uplift those is really helpful, because it allows people to see that there is a filmmaking community there. And I think things like that can only help strengthen it.
Yeah. Something I think I heard a few of you say is that there's a good foundation and there's a quiet network. And I think the solution maybe is that we need to turn up the volume on that network, right? We need to crank it to 11, as it were, and increase the volume on it. And I think it sounds like the festivals is one really good step. Are there other good steps to sort of increase the loudness of that interconnected community?
I think not only the local festivals, but even maybe more importantly, submitting to other festivals. Because, 50 Little Birds played in Alabama and in Canada and in New York and LA. So showing people in other places what we can do here is good.
Awesome. Very good.
I just want to jump in really quick if I can.
Yeah, please do.
And you've talked about the festivals. Can you kind of give us an idea, talking about that festival circuit, what do you have to do and what's it like? So I didn't jump in.
It's expensive in terms of, so I use a resource, and I'm sure Hannah did. It's just like filmfreeway.com, I think. And you upload your movie, you have all of your information on there, and you can look through thousands of film festivals. And it's a very neat resource. And you essentially, you can try and do just Indiana ones. You could look all over the world, but again, there's thousands, and each one costs X amount of money. So you kind of, when you're budgeting your movie, I think it's important to budget for doing the film festival circuit and things like that. And after doing it, and I'm still kind of in the middle of it, but after doing it for this period of time, I now know in the future, like, there's no reason to waste your time submitting to certain film festivals. There's a lot of ones that it wouldn't benefit you in any way to be a part of, and you're just paying money to, basically, for no reason.
Or they're cost prohibitive, right?
Yes. Yeah. Maybe on average, it's maybe $50 to submit to each one. And I think there's just a lot of resources that you can read online about which ones to submit to and why to submit to it. But yeah, I think, it's interesting. And the only one that I've physically been to was, because just started that this year. I went to the Hoosier Film Festival in Bloomington, a month ago. And that was a really cool experience. And it was great. We won Best Actor for that movie. And so that was a very fulfilling thing for me, at least. I'm sure it was very fulfilling for the actress also. But yeah, it's a bit very interesting, the festival stuff. It would be great if Ball State maybe would do a film festival or anything like that.
I do have some tips, or I guess I have a certain strategy when I go about it for it. I create a spreadsheet at the beginning before I've even finished the film there's like a way to do lists in Film Freeway, but you can't like sort it and stuff. And I'm like just enough type A that I want to have a spreadsheet. So I have like a spreadsheet and I list, the ones that I'm interested in, but I like prioritize the ones that I think I'd be more likely to get into. So those are ones that are regionally. So, the states surrounding Indiana, states I have any connection to, like Alabama. Also any themes. So with 50 Little Birds, we got into several mental health themed filmed festivals, but we also got into like outdoors themed film festivals. So any themes that your film might touch on, like search those themes in Film Freeway. And then I put them all in a spreadsheet and I kind of divide it into like stages. So it's not as much of a financial burden to do like all of them at once. Because if it's $50 a pop and you're submitting to like 20 film festivals, which is not even that many. I mean, that's just a lot of money. So I usually do it in phases. You can also see there's usually early bird deadlines that are cheaper. Or if you follow those festivals on social media, they'll often put out like promo codes that give you like Indie Shorts. Last month, we promoted a 40% off. I mean, that's great. So yeah, if you're really, really interested in submitting to a festival, like look at them early, way before the end of their deadline, and follow them on social media.
Now, Hannah, I think you already pointed out you've done this before, but have you been to other film festivals, or has anyone else been to festivals where you're screening at it? Like it's a different feel to go with your film to a festival, sort of a deal, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, 50 Little Birds came out in the middle of the pandemic, which I'm sure Rachel had the same experience. So didn't get to go to quite as many in person. But the premiere was at Indie Shorts, which was out at the Tibbs Drive-In. And it was just like the most magically perfect, like great weather, not too hot, even though it was July. So that screening was truly amazing. But I haven't really gotten to go to many other festivals, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo the exact same thing as Hannah, because mine came out in the middle of the pandemic too, which was a bummer. I was really excited to go through film festivals, and then the pandemic hit and everything went virtual. So for me, my only festival experience was the Indie Shorts out at the Tibbs Drive-In, which was kind of like a saving grace for me because I was so excited because I didn't get to experience any other kind of in-person screenings or festivals due to the pandemic. So that's what I'll say about that. And then I would also echo kind of the same thing about the festival process. I honestly went into it head first without knowing what I was doing. It was just kind of something I wanted to try. But I learned a lot along the way. And so I definitely did a lot of Googling and started making sure I was targeting specific festivals, kind of like Hannah already said. So my documentary dealt a lot with Black life and like racial and social issues. And so we got into a lot of festivals that dealt with that theme. So I was making sure that I was kind of targeting things that had that like specific kind of thing that they were looking for, or something that was Indiana based, because I was living in Indiana at the time. The whole documentary was shot in Indiana, and all the people in it were living in Indiana. So we shot in like Indianapolis, Anderson, Columbus. And so I will say definitely, I think targeting the right festivals is a big part of it. And then one other thing I'll add that I think I should have done differently that I didn't was kind of getting maybe some behind the scenes stuff to use on social as a way to promote my film, which I didn't think anything about that because at the time I was just trying to get through the production process. And by the end of it, I was so stressed out that I didn't think anything about doing like anything that was related to behind the scenes stuff. But I started finding that when I was going through festival submissions, a lot of them were asking for any type of like crew pictures or behind the scenes photos or clips. And then some of them were wanting to see like a social media presence for the documentary. And so I created a Facebook and an Instagram for the film, but then I quickly realized I didn't have a whole lot to post because I didn't have any like behind the scenes stuff or any content to put out there aside from what was in the film or like taking stills from the actual film. So I would definitely say that maybe that's something people could think about, because that's definitely something I would do differently next go around.
I 100% agree. As the person who promotes the films for Heartland, I'm trying to get people into seats to see your film. So the more assets you could give me, trailers and posters and stills and yes, like all that stuff. You always need way, way, way more assets than you think you need for it. And it's helping us, especially if you have social media. Like that's another way. If you're going to the festivals or if you're promoting that you're going to be at the festivals, that's an easy reshare for festivals. And then it gets more eyes on your film. It gets more people who are going to say, oh, I want to buy a ticket to see that one.
And I made sure it, because a lot of people were telling me that before I made the movie, and they even told me, oh, set up like an interview camera and like interview my cast and like talk about the film process. But I did not get around to doing that. But I did hire a photographer for one of the days. And I'm very happy I did. I wish I would have hired him for more days, but like that's just like money that you're just spending on like non-movie specific things, so it's kind of hard to do more than that.
Another piece of advice I'll give, since part of me feels so bad, everyone premiering during the pandemic, but go with your films to the festivals whenever you can. I will tell you that going to some festivals with my films, I would meet people, go to all of the meet and greets, any of them you can, schmooze, do all that sort of stuff. And as you're going through it, I would end up meeting people who were actually there for business, scouting films for other film festivals. And quite often I'd meet people who were like, well, and here's a card, and I'd love to have your film in our festival down in Texas next month. And this will get you in for free or for $10 or for 50% off or whatever it is. And there's just something fun about, I think, the shared experience of being there with your creation and seeing other people with their creations. And like all of you sort of have very different experiences, but also the same experiences and the same joy in getting to share it with everyone else. So wonderful. Dottie, do you have any other questions to wrap us up?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about budgeting. You talked about make sure you think about those film festivals and budgeting. What are some other things that people might not think about when they're budgeting? Like, are there, where is funding available? So can you talk about maybe those different things? What things skipped your mind that, hey, you got to remember to fund for this, and where do you find funding?
So I self-funded my movie just through like saving up money over the course of years. But I see a lot of people doing like Kickstarters and like Indiegogo, things like that. And that seems to be fairly successful. Like you can give them people perks like, oh, you get to show up on set for a day, or you get to, you get a signed poster when it's over, or you get to eat with the cast and crew for lunch one day, stuff like that. So I've been seeing that be fairly successful. In terms of financial things in the budget, I will say, like the marketing and the festival circuit stuff, I think is something that people probably forget about. Also maybe like the craft services, just like feeding people, or like all the snacks, at least that you need to have on set, and driving like the miles. Because I do think it is important to pay everybody that you can. I know some people will pay people, will do like pay on the back end, or they just won't pay at all, and they're just getting like volunteers to like, I don't know what they say, like for exposure or for a learning process. But yeah, I think it's probably Kickstarters or Indiegogo seems to be a decent idea, or just work as a bunch of jobs and save up also is an option.
I'll admit my 2 budget shortfalls in case it helps anyone else. For the net makers, all of our shoots pretty much were outside, and half of them were on the river. So it's very weather dependent, and I didn't take into account, the Airbnb, like having to cancel the Airbnb because of weather, and then the Airbnb people not wanting to give you a refund. So that was definitely like, maybe I'm thinking I'll put in a line item next time of just like $1,000 of just like fallback money. And then the other thing, I guess it wasn't a mistake, but it's definitely something I prioritize, is getting someone you trust and like, to do the score, and really making sure that you're spending the money on that rather than just using like canned music if possible, because it can just make a huge difference.
Yep, I think I would kind of echo the same thing. Definitely the festival fees, because those add up. I knew that they cost money, but I don't think I actually did the math to think of like how many I would apply to, and then how much the overall amount would come out to that I would be spending on festival submissions. And then also definitely budgeting if you're traveling anywhere for travel to go film. And then for me, when I was doing my interviews, I had like these big frames in the background of each person that had different pictures of them, different stylistic pictures of them in them. And so we did like a little bit of set design, because those frames ended up being doors that there were screen doors that I bought from the Habitat Restore, and like sawed them into pieces and sanded and painted them and all this to create like these massive frames for the background. So, and then I bought like a specific chair, I think, to match that for the actual interview. So I would say also kind of thinking about the style and the way that you want to present the story, and if there's any needed like set design with that. And then as far as like financing and money and stuff, I also self-funded. And I know a lot of people who do crowdfunding, like Eric said, with Kickstarter, and things like that. And then maybe grants. I don't know a whole lot of people who have done grants, because a lot of people kind of default towards the crowdfunding route. But I would say that those are kind of just my suggestions and the things that I learned along the way in the process.
And to echo your point on like set design stuff, I know we bought a lot of clothing, like nice clothing from a store. And our goal was, okay, we'll just return it all. And we ended up just like completely forgetting about it. And then it was like, 2 months later, and it's like, oh, great, I have hundreds of dollars worth of clothing. And I also bought like a lot of, my movie revolves around like a cult. And so I bought like so many cult robes, and I have nothing to do with them now. And like all that stuff added up to a lot of money that, I can't really do anything with them now except like put them in a storage bin in the attic.
Always start a cult.
Yeah, that's an idea. We'll see what happens next year.
I could speak to grants if you want me to, because I've gotten 3 grants over the years. So my first grant was actually when I was at school. It was the WIPB student funded grant. So they were looking for a program to fit their half-hour schedule, and I led a team of students to produce that one. That was a $10,000 grant. So that was my first opportunity, or I guess experience in applying and receiving a grant. And that one was a great opportunity. And then I have received 2 grants, as I mentioned, from Indiana Humanities. In 2018, they started doing a program where they give out 5 or 6 pretty small grants to make short films with whatever their theme is that year. And I've just chosen waterways both years because I do love the river and stuff like that. So those have been great because it's like a pretty broad theme, and there are still many, but there's still like many topics. And just, you can see that just by looking at like the 6 films that got funded this year. It's just a variety of different topics with the central theme of waterways. And my experience with them was great. You know, it was very clear on putting together what you needed to put together to apply. And then you go through several rounds of interviews. I think it was just maybe like 2, one virtually, one in person. And then, you know, you find out whether you got it or not. And I think they're a great resource. I hope they continue to do that. And it's been pretty successful from what I've seen so far. I think it's a great opportunity, especially for shorts. I don't know. I love shorts. I think it's a great way to get a lot of experiences in a lot of different ways because you can knock out more of them. So yeah, I hope they keep doing that.
Great. Any last minute comments or tips for maybe some of our newer alumni that have graduated that want to get into the filmmaking business here in Indiana?
Just make connections, I guess. You know, I just reached out to Sonny and asked him if he had anyone that he thought would be interested in possibly taking over some of my freelance work. And so just by that person making a good connection with Sonny, then they got connected with me, and now I'm going to be giving them work. So truly, like when I graduated, my mom would always tell me network. Like that's the number one thing, especially here in Indiana in the film scene.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, networking is probably the biggest thing. I know all the crew on my movie were crew that I used just on random video production shoots that I hired. And they all went to Ball State also. So that aspect is great. I think new alumni need to just maybe like put themselves out there or like look. I mean, there's a lot of crew calls, I think, in the area. And I think if they are willing to get in somehow, I think that helps in terms of, use you on future projects and things of that nature. But yeah, you just have to know where to look. And like I had mentioned, like I think the Indiana like filmmakers network was very helpful, and it's a huge, if you introduce yourself and things like that, there'll be people who might say, I'll keep you in mind, things of that nature, at least.
And go to Indie Shorts and Heartland. Buy like one of the big passes and go to all the like after hours events and introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, I would definitely say networking for sure, and putting yourself out there. I've even suggested to people like cold calling production companies and stuff in Indy just to see what they have going on. Because I've actually done that a couple of times, and it ended up in like me getting either an internship or like freelance work and kind of making a connection there. And then once I get on like freelance, then I was able to meet other people through that. So I feel like there's a lot of different ways to kind of find ways to get connected with people, whether it's, like I said, cold calling or emailing production companies that you find online that you think you might be interested in working with. Like Hannah said, going to Heartland, and then the Indiana Filmmakers Network and like different social media groups. So I think there's like a variety of ways that you could kind of put yourself out there and try to find that network.
I do think Indiana's Yes, or Instagram is definitely, I've found more and more people networking on Instagram. It's such like an easy way to be like, here's my work, almost like a portfolio. If it's just like strictly a professional page. And I see posts all the time about, crew calls and stuff, but it's like, hey, I need, someone to do BTS on this shoot, or I need I need a PA on this shoot. So there might be opportunities there.
Or yeah, it's like if you want to make something, you can just go out there and just post in one of these places and say, hey, I'm just out of college. I want to make this movie. I have this idea, let's make a short together. And I assume there's a lot of people who would say, yeah, I'd love to help. I'd love to help. Things like that. You just have to take some initiative. I think that goes a long way, especially in this, industry.
And I think one other quick thing that I would add is on the flip side of the social media part, while reaching out to people, I would also suggest that people start putting up their own content. Because like Hannah said, with finding people on social media, Instagram a lot, I've actually heard people say that they feel like social media is becoming like the new resume. And so I think while you're reaching out to people, also kind of having your own presence and your own content on there, so that while you're trying to network and find those opportunities, you kind of have something of your own to also present and be like, hey, this is what I've done. This is what I can do. And this is kind of how I can help you if you let me in the network and kind of give me an opportunity. So I think that would also be something that I would suggest that newer alumni also think about when trying to get into the industry and in that network.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, instead of building out a website now for when you are trying to get your work, I feel like it's more like Instagram pages. Cause somebody will follow my professional page and I'll be like, oh, who's that? And I'll click on them and I'll look and they'll have all their work and I can just very quickly see what's their style? Are they a cinematographer? Are they a producer? Are they a director? It's just so easy and it's all right there. So, and plus then you get a little bit more personality too, I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, I think we'll wrap things up then. If there's no other questions you have, Ben.
No.
I want to thank Ben for being our moderator, and I want to thank Rachel, Hannah, and Eric for joining us in the control room tonight and for a great conversation about filmmaking in our Hoosier state. Look for our next Cardinal Control Room conversation sometime in June. And if you have any topics that you want to see discussed in the control room, you can send us an email at askbsumedia. Thanks for joining us.